things are changing. You know, Twitter.
That's for sure.
We have different ways to reach people now and wake them up. So I think there's a little bit of hope.
No, listen, I completely agree with you on that. And I think that we're entering like a whole new, like a crazy paradigm shift. And that typically when that happens, there's a lot of reason to be concerned, but then there's also a lot of reason to be optimistic. So like, you're like, okay, there's the potential for disaster, but then there's also the potential. And I think what you just said is like the main, I think to me, that's like the biggest white pill, is that what's happening, if you zoom out and look at it, is that like for the first time in human history, the monopoly on information has been cracked. Right. And now there is no monopoly on it anymore. And so, yes, a lot of bullshit can get out, but also the truth can get out in a way that it never could before.
And I'm assuming with you, it's probably the same. You probably just felt like the system probably driving you crazy, and you're like, well, maybe I should start a podcast and start trying to speak up, start trying to make some changes. Like normal people can make changes now.
Yeah. Oh, and when I started, it was literally just like therapy. Like I was just like, I got to say that I got to get this out, or I'm going to make all my friends hate me. So let me just speak it into the
so my
world,
don't have
you
to
know?
hear it nonstop.
Yeah. So, but there is something where like, you know, I remember, so I'm 41 and like, so I'm old enough to vividly remember like post 9/11. Like I was an adult, a young adult, but I was an adult, you know? And I remember it was like in September 2001, 9/11 happens. It wasn't until 2003 that we invaded Iraq. But for that whole time period, from the end of 2001 all through 2002, was just war drums for Iraq, just laying down the propaganda. Oh, and it was all bullshit. You know, he's in bed with Al Qaeda. He's got nuclear weapons.
Muslims,
yeah.
Sunni and Shiites, they're enemies.
It was all it was all goddamn. Well, he was like, you know, in the bath or whatever his party was, but he hated the Al Qaeda guys, and they were brutal enemies.
They were enemies.
But that for that whole period while they were laying down that war propaganda, we just didn't have anything like what we have today. Yeah. Like there was no Joe Rogan, there was no Tucker Carlson, there was no
Twitter's massive too.
There was no Twitter. I mean, I don't think Twitter even existed at the time. No, definitely didn't.
Yeah.
So like,
and that's where the news is all.
There was nothing like any of this shit, and so they simply couldn't do that again in the same way they did. So to me, that's like that's a reason to be optimistic for sure.
Well, I think guys like us can make a difference. That's why I started speaking up. Obviously, my manager, everyone's like, "You're an idiot. Don't speak up and stuff." But I'm like, I feel like I have to. It's like try to save my country. I have to like try to push what's right.
I think men. It's incumbent on men to speak up, and I think that telling the truth is way more powerful than people realize. There's ideas matter, and this is why governments use propaganda. It's because they know the ideas matter.
A lot of times when you start saying things, other people are secretly start telling you they agree with you.
Yeah.
No one will say it, but then when I'll be the first one to start saying these things, and everyone's like whispering, "Oh, I agree with you." So it's like, well, then say it to other people.
Yeah.
Our ideas aren't fringe.
Yeah, and also like, I mean, I think, you know, I feel a little bit of like an obligation too to like, you know, like I got kids, and look, there is probably I shouldn't even say probably. There's a line where I could be silenced. You know what I mean? Like I got little kids and I have to be around for them. I have to protect them first and foremost, you know, like that's,
I'm not scared of death, but I worry a little bit for my kids, you know?
Right. But then there's like a thing like where, you know, people also, they'll have this thing where it's like, dude, that was really courageous for you to say that or something. And it's like, not really. Like, I'm not really taking that much of a risk. It's like, okay, I'm not going to get a corporate job, or like, you know, you could get kicked off this platform. Like, you know, it's like
kicked off YouTube soon.
Okay, but like, okay, if those are the stakes, then it is kind of incumbent on us to like tell the goddamn truth, especially when it's like, look, this country is like being destroyed over this shit, and so it's like, you know, for people like us who kind of like are, you know, it's like I remember the '90s. And I'm not saying everything was perfect in the 90s, but it was a much healthier country than it is today.
Yeah, the 90s were
amazing.
And like, you know, maybe it's just like nostalgic, but to me it seemed like such a better time.
Yeah, I think it's more than that. I think it's also that this country's like kind of spinning out of control.
Yeah, I would agree.
A lot of the problems we have, we just didn't have then. I'm not saying we didn't have problems at all, but like it was not as crazy as it is, like as it is now. And so, yeah, I think like for especially people who have kids in this country, it's like we're all kind of like motivated by the same thing, which is like, hey, we want
Yeah.
This is the country our kids are going to grow up in. We'd like it to be a nice place. We'd like it to be a nice place to grow up in.
Yeah.
And that is at risk right now.
Well, the big one, when I was living in San Francisco, they're pushing all the trans stuff on kids, and none of the parents liked it, but they're all too scared to say anything. And they're all telling me, and I'm like, what? Like, literally, all the different people are telling me the same thing. That it's driving them crazy. They're teaching their kids this trans stuff, but they're all too scared to be called transphobic to go, like, stop teaching my kids this crap.
And that's just nuts to me, man. That's nuts that like, there's got to be a line somewhere. Like, I understand the impulse sometimes to be like, I don't want to be that guy who, like, says something. But when they're doing this type of shit, like, like abusive type shit like that, come on, that's got to be over the line where it's like, okay, have the uncomfortable moment. Like, say something.
Yeah, like I said, I wanted to get into your cream, but I go in just a second. So I guess, like, the last question, I know you more from political commentating, but I've seen your comedy. You're actually hilarious too.
Thank you.
Like, when did you get into comedy, and then what started your transfer over?
So I started stand up in 2006, and then I found Ron Paul in 2007, and just got really interested in his presidential campaign. So I was doing stand up already for a little while, and then it was all over the war stuff that I loved.
You were always like kind of a political.
I wasn't.
Or no?
No, I wasn't really like. I didn't really give a shit about politics. Like when I was a teenager and like in my 20s, it was like, I don't know, I was trying to get laid and get drunk and yeah.
That's all I cared about.
That was not, that was like not even on my radar. But I was like, you know, I was in New York City during 9/11, so that kind of affected me, and it was like, oh shit. And then, you know, I was coming of age during the George W. Bush years, and I didn't like him.
God, he was terrible.
I knew he was a liar, and I kind of had like a vague sense of like the wars and the Patriot Act and all this shit were bad. But then when I saw Ron Paul speak, I was like, yo, who the fuck is that guy? I had never heard of this dude. And it was like, he was like this old country doctor with like Texas R next to his name, and then he was the most hardcore anti-war guy, and I just found that to be really fascinating. And then he was just making all these like arguments about economics, and I didn't really understand them, but I was just interested, and I just like fell down the rabbit hole and started reading all his stuff, and then, you know, reading all other people's, and, you know, just got obsessed with it. And then it just bleeded into my career. And then years later, when the podcast took off, it, you know, became like my thing.
When I first saw you, maybe Rogan or something, but you're like, you were making just so much sense. I'm like, oh, this guy's awesome.
Well, I felt like I was kind of lucky in the sense that I started reading like all of the right people to read. So it was like Ron Paul and Tom Woods and Murray Rothbard and Lou Rockwell and Pat Buchanan and like they're just all these guys.
I need to
who's like, once you read them, you're kind of like, oh shit, like I see the arguments that are being made here, and I get where they're just so much more, there's such better arguments than the arguments that are being made by the establishment and shit. So it was just, I was like, I was very lucky that I started reading like so many of the right people to read, and then it's kind of like once you see that, you kind of can't unsee it.
Yeah, you never like switch from that view to the other.
It's very hard to, and also like it's just the, you know, economics is it's an important science, man. And when you start to understand how they fuck with the money, how that fucks over regular people.
That's why there's inflation.
Yes.
If you're normal middle class right now trying to feed a family, it's tough.
Oh yeah. Oh no, it's brutal.
Grocery store, like I do well, and I look at the price sometimes. I'm like, what?
Oh, it's it's unbelievable. It's especially
crazy,
just being our age, because it just sounds so like, and you don't pay attention all the time.
How are
but
people surviving on like these lower wages? It's like it's tough. People want to like, oh, it's their fault and stuff, but it's like, I don't know. It's tough.
Dude, I remember like, if you made, when I was younger, if you made 70 grand a year, you were rich. Yeah, we looked at you like you were fucking rich.
But feeding a family on 70 grand a year
in a
is
city,
impossible.
if you're in a city in this country,
like, New York, no way.
Oh, you're underwater, dude. You're drowning. Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. But yeah, I think that's a good time to wrap up. So, where do people find you? What's your podcast?
Part of the Problem is my podcast. Partoftheproblem.com. It's all the shows are up there, and then I'm on Twitter and Comic Dave Smith and all that. Instagram, yeah, I'm the Problem Dave Smith on Instagram.
You are the problem, huh?
I am the problem.
A little bit of both.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah, thanks for the interview.
Dude, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. You're the man, brother.